that would resolve the crisis. The opponents of Arianism, led by Osius and Alexander, exploited this fact to the hilt. They had agreed beforehand to frame the debate using particular wording that described the Father and the Son as being of the same substance, which they knew would be unacceptable to Arius and his followers. The debate that unfolded over the course of the next month was a bitter one, and at one point Arius was even struck in the face by a rival clergyman. Dismayed at the degree of vitriol on display, a group of bishops put forward a compromise creed that described the Father and Son as being of similar substance, but it was rejected by the hardliners in both camps. More as a result of backroom politicking than persuasive public oratory, the anti-Arians started to flip the delegates one by one, until eventually the same substance formulation was accepted by a majority of the council. Once the majority had turned against them, the moderate Arians began to feel the heat, and with the threat of excommunication and exile hanging over their heads, they too signed on to the same substance creed. In the end, only 2 of the staunchest Arian bishops refused to sign. The so-called Nicene Creed was adopted by the council as orthodoxy in June of 325. It stated that Jesus Christ was God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of the same substance as the Father, by whom all things were made. Opposition to this formulation was now considered heretical. Arius, just as Osius and his allies had predicted, refused to accept the creed's language and was exiled by Constantine to Illyria, far away from his power base in Egypt. Though the matter appeared to be settled for good, neither Arius nor the Arians were done just yet. The council then moved on to its remaining business, and made decisions on how to calculate the date of Easter, what to do about the Meletians, they were to be treated leniently, and what ought to be the Church's final position on Trotatorius. They were to be accepted back without the need for rebaptism. By the end of the meeting in June of 325, the assembled bishops ruled on a canon law. These included the recognition that the bishops of Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch had a sort of super-authority over and above normal bishops, a prohibition on clergy engaging in usury, and a law against self-castration, which, yikes. All in all, the Council of Nicaea did exactly what Constantine wanted, while simultaneously failing to do what Constantine wanted. The collection of bishops had come together and successfully determined where to draw the line between orthodoxy and heresy on a host of issues. It had given the Christians a new sense of global unity by moving the Church away from the patchwork series of beliefs that varied from time to time and from place to place. But if he was hoping the establishment of this new orthodoxy was going to actually end the arguments between the Christians, that men declared heretical were just going to lay down their beliefs and give up the fight, then Constantine was in for a rude awakening. Far from putting these matters to bed, the Council of Nicaea simply wound up codifying the position of one side of the argument. Constantine just did not grasp that the religion he had adopted had never actually been unified. It had appeared to be one monolithic force when it was set against the dominant Greco-Roman culture, but once you actually got into it, it turned out that Christian belief was almost as varied as pagan belief. The Council of Nicaea was not going to stop Arius from preaching what he believed to be true. It was not just a matter of life and death for him, but a matter of eternal salvation. The Donatists, the Meletians, and all the other minor heresies would eventually be stamped out, but the proclamation of a bunch of bishops meeting on the coast of the Aegean Sea was not going to do the job on its own. But as the council wrapped up, Constantine had a pretty good feeling about things, and believed that his vision of one emperor ruling one empire and one church serving one God was close at hand. Next time, we will delve into more worldly matters, and discuss what Constantine was up to when he wasn't promoting and defending Christianity. There were, after all, still wars to be fought and a government to run, so it's not like Constantine could just hole up in church councils all the time and debate the finer points of theology. Plus, there was a certain city that needed building. This week's episode is brought to you by Audible. As you know, Audible is the internet's leading provider of audio entertainment with over 80,000 titles to choose from. When you're done with this episode, go to audiblepodcast.com/Rome. That again, audiblepodcast.com/Rome. By going to that address, you qualify for a free book download when you sign up for a 14-day trial membership. There is no obligation to continue the service, and you can cancel anytime and keep the free book. You can also keep going with one of the monthly subscription options and get great deals on all future audiobook purchases. This week, I'm going to go with a recommendation from listener Mark Andre, Before the Dawn by Nicholas Wade, a look at the origin and spread of humanity from a genetic point of view. Just remember to go to audiblepodcast.com/Rome so that they know who sent you. Hello, and welcome to the History of Rome. Episode 138, The New Rome. So, last time, we focused exclusively on Constantine's relationship with and promotion of Christianity. Obviously, the emperor's push to convert the empire was a hugely important step in the development of the Western world, but it was by no means the only thing he was up to in the years after he became sole ruler of the Roman Empire. There were still wars to be fought, a government to be run, and oh yeah, a whole new Rome to build. So today, I want to dive into all the not overtly Christian aspects of Constantine's reign. I say not overtly Christian because the emperor's religion was so tangled up in everything that he did that you can't just separate it out and say, this stuff has to do with Christianity, and this stuff doesn't. Even something as basic as the construction of Constantinople, which was a project undertaken first and foremost for strategic and political reasons, winds up taking on a heavy Christian dimension. It's inescapable. That was just the nature of the man. They didn't wind up calling him the equal of the apostles for nothing. Speaking of Constantinople, we might as well start there because Constantine broke ground on his new capital practically the morning after he defeated Licinius in September 324 AD. The rapidity with which he moved to transform the ancient city of Byzantium into the new city of Constantinople speaks to how much thought Constantine had given the project prior to his victory over Licinius. So the questions we must ask are, why did Constantine feel like he needed a new capital, and why did he choose Byzantium for his imperial makeover? As you know, Rome itself had ceased to be the political and military capital of the Roman Empire a long time ago. Round about 260, the emperors had moved decisively away from the Eternal City to more strategically sound locations across the empire. And in the 65 years or so since Gallienus first set up shop in Milan, multiple cities had wound up serving as imperial capitals at one point or another. Trier along the Rhine, Milan in Italy, Sirmium along the Danube, Nicomedia at the crossroads between Europe and Asia, and Antioch in the Far East. But as Constantine surveyed the military and political situation of the empire following his victory at Chrysopolis, no one of these cities really satisfied his vision for what a true imperial capital should be. They all had their merits as really one emperor ruling one empire, and one capital was called for. Constantine needed a city that was centrally located, easily defensible, situated on the sea with a good harbor, and had easy access to the Danube frontier, which everyone understood to be the most volatile in the empire. Of the existing capitals, Nicomedia was the most obvious candidate to become Constantine's headquarters. By that point, it was already recognized as being one of the preeminent cities of the empire. But the emperor didn't really like that it was located on the east side of the Bosphorus, and while he found the city's defenses adequate, Nicomedia did not necessarily scream, "I am immune to siege." But over the course of his 2 wars with Licinius, Constantine had become aware of a city that, if upgraded properly, would fit all his conditions for a great capital: Byzantium. Located right on the west bank of the southern entrance of the Bosphorus, Byzantium had a fabulous natural harbor, which meant supply and trade would be no problem. It was also located right smack dab at the crossroads between east and west, which would not only allow the emperor to quickly move to trouble spots, but it would also keep communication lines relatively short, meaning that Constantine would become aware of trouble spots that much quicker. But the coup de grace was that the ancient Greek city was surrounded on 3 sides by water. This meant that a hostile land army could approach from one direction and one direction only, and if you were to, say, build a massive wall covering that flank, the city would be impregnable. And while the hostile army banged their heads against that wall, the residents of the city could sit tight and enjoy the benefits of infinite resupply by sea. Constantine looked at Byzantium, and it screamed to him, "I am immune to siege." As with everything else he did, though, there was a religious rationale for building a new capital to go along with the obvious military and political rationales. By basically building a brand new city from the ground up, Constantine ensured that he would not have to deal with any pushback from entrenched religious interests when he revealed the fact that his new capital was going to be an exclusively Christian capital. The major cities of the empire, by virtue of being the major cities of the empire, hosted all of the most important cults and temples of the empire. Byzantium, being a relatively minor city up until this point, was not saddled with that kind of pagan baggage. Though the story would not take root for at least a generation, it was widely believed in the Byzantine age that the Christian character of the city was set from the start, and that it was an archangel, visible only to Constantine, who told the emperor where to set the boundaries of the new city. In November of 324, and just a month after his victory over Licinius, Constantine made the short trip from Nicomedia to Byzantium and began eagerly marking up the layout, possibly with the help of an invisible archangel, for what he grandly declared would be the Alterna Roma, the new or second Rome. The name Constantinople, which meant literally the city of Constantine, was at first only an informal nickname for the emperor's pet project, but within a few years, the unofficial name stuck, and it would remain stuck for more than 1,000 years. Constantine planned for the city to be the greatest in the empire, and laid the boundaries and the grid lines accordingly. But Byzantium by no means became Constantinople overnight. At this point in history, Rome was a city of maybe 1 million people. The other big cities of the empire, Alexandria and Antioch and Nicomedia, were filled with populations in the hundreds of thousands. When Constantine began to transform Byzantium, though, it was a city of tens of thousands. In other words, it had a lot of growing up to do if it was really going to compete with the big boys. In a way, the early days of the New Rome parallel the early days of the Old Rome. You'll recall from way back in episode 2 that the first generation of Romans were a motley bunch. In an effort to populate his city quickly, Romulus had thrown the doors open to anyone who happened by.